Check. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We're excited to do NAIOP Central Ohio Presents Affordable and Workforce Housing. First, I would love to thank our annual gold sponsors, Colliers, Daimler, Huntington, MP Limited, Prologis, Van Trust, and Voorhees. Thank you so much. We can't do what we do without our sponsors. Silver sponsors, Savista, the Columbus region, One Columbus, DRK and Company and Metro Development, EMH&T, Excel, FCL Builders, First Commonwealth Bank, and Stream and Wetlands Foundation. And finally, our bronze sponsors, Bricker Neckler, Civil and Environmental Consultants, Alfred Kimley Horn, Kleingers Group, Mannix Smith Group, Ohio Electric Cooperatives, Secure Law Omni Title, Stewart Title, and the Tonti Organization. Thank you all so much. Today, we are so lucky to have with us moderating our own president of NAIOP this year, Trey Giller. He's also the CEO and president of Metro Development. He will be moderating our panel today. And thank you and welcome to our panelists as well. Amy Alberry, she's the COO of Wallet Communities. David Cooper, Jr., he's a principal with the Woda Cooper Companies. And Bruce Lukey, president and CEO of Homeport. We're so excited to have you all with us today. And we will go ahead and jump right into that. Trey?
Okay, thanks, Debbie. Really excited about the topic today. I think we have three great panelists to discuss what, as we all know, and is an affordability issue here in Central Ohio with housing. And I think today we'll get a real good insight as an organization and a group of developers as it relates to the different trials and tribulations and the challenges that come along with developing affordable housing projects in Central Ohio. With that said, I'm gonna go right into the presentation. We've got 50-ish minutes. We've got a great panel and we've got some great topics. We're going, just as a housekeeping item, we're going to take care of questions at the end. There is the Q&A box on your Zoom screen. If you want to type in a question there, Debbie Lee will look through those questions and we will answer the questions. We'll leave about 10 minutes at the end to answer questions. So if you do have questions, please feel free to bring them, put them in the box, and we'll get to them at the very end of the presentation. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I thought the best way to start this would be with kind of getting an overview from each of the individuals on their companies and the projects that they're currently doing. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Amy. Amy, why don't you share some of your company, what you guys are doing, and what you've got going on in Central Ohio.
Thanks, Trey. I appreciate it. And thanks to NAIOP for inviting David, Bruce, and I today to share a little bit about what's happening on the affordable housing side of the world. Again, my name is Amy Alberry, Chief Operating Officer with Wallet Communities. Wallet Communities is a Central Ohio firm based in New Albany, and it's a vertically integrated organization. So we have development, construction, property management, and asset management under our roof. The types of projects that we are working on the affordable housing side are really focused on, and we'll get into this later on in the conversation, on the qualified allocation plan that are in each of the 8 states that we're working in. So it's really interesting how we approach that. And for us, we have existing housing stock. We're a 55-year-old company. So we're renovating our Section 8 or tax credit communities through the tax credit program. Sometimes we're buying existing schools and doing adaptive reuse for affordable housing and both families and seniors. And then also other housing or development that we're doing that's not on the affordable side is senior living communities. And I bring that up today. While it's not part of the conversation or the tax credit program, it's a way that we feel we're filling the need of the seniors in our affordable housing communities to give them a place to potentially move to when they need 24-hour care. So on a high level, those are the types of things we're working on, Trey, and all moving levers and pulling levers to understand what the need is in the particular states and areas we're working on. So we meet the need of the state priority and also meet the needs of the residents in those areas.
Great. Thanks, Amy. Thanks for that overview. I think that's helpful. David?
Sure. Thanks for having me. We're a much younger company, I guess, than Wallach. We're in our 31st year of existence. We actually operate in 16 states. We've got 25 properties and about 1,500 units under construction now. We've got 3 properties under construction in Columbus. We house a little bit over 25,000 people. So I think like Wallach, we continue to own everything we ever developed, which is 350 plus properties, and manage those. We're also vertically integrated. We serve seniors, we serve families. We work a lot in both urban areas. We've done a lot of urban development in Columbus, Atlanta, Baltimore, cities like that. We also do some rural development. And I would say we are increasingly doing some commercial development that is kind of subsidiary to the affordable housing that we build. We've got small grocery stores and pharmacies and other types of neighborhood commercial uses that have become important as we get properties zoned and work with cities in terms of trying to address their needs.
Great, Dave. I appreciate that. Appreciate that, your perspective on that and the overview of your company. And last but not least, we'll go to Bruce.
Thanks, Trey. Homeport is a 34-year-old company, different than Wallach or WODA in that we're a nonprofit developer, and we are primarily focused in the Central Ohio market. So we have 40 communities here in Central Ohio. We have another 3 or 4 that are under construction or near to be under construction. That's about 2,500 units, about 6,500 residents live with us. And, our concentration or our emphasis has changed a little bit over the last few years. We were primarily over the years pretty much focused within the city, but while we continue to work in the city and in some, certain areas like a Linden or a Milo Grogan, we've done quite a bit of development now in the suburbs. We just finished in Grove City, Reynoldsburg, and looking out there too, but we are very much centrally Ohio focused.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. And I thought now that we've got kind of a little bit of background on everybody, let's dive right into kind of some of the topics that we kind of sketched out for the call. Amy, I'll start with you maybe on a couple specific projects, and then as a tag along. Also, have you seen big changes from a COVID perspective on how your operations going from either on-site operations or internal office operations as you're moving through, some of the projects that you're working on?
I would say, yeah, thanks, Trey. From a COVID perspective, I'll start with the last question that you asked. For our residents, well, in affordable housing in general, when COVID started, versus our senior living side, healthcare isn't something that we're typically operating around or something that we're planning around. So for our residents and our associates wrapping their heads around what COVID meant, and our seniors, if we're closing down their community spaces where they're used to gathering, that was a difficult thing to do. On the associate side, then understanding how we can operate differently and working with the different housing finance agencies and HUD to push them forward and to accept things such as electronic signatures, and put us in an environment where we could do more work, again, over email or electronically than we were ever allowed or that was approved to do so before. So as far as the need for housing, I think we all know and would agree that affordable housing was at a deficit pre-COVID and is even at more of a deficit post-COVID. As we think about types of projects, and I think, Trey, you wanted to dig in just a couple of specifics that maybe have been influenced. and I touched on this a little bit at the beginning. Uh, we're working on what the states want as far as priorities. Uh, so also looking internally on how we can grow and meet the need of our residents. For example, we have a project in London, Ohio that completed last year and we leased up in June of 2020. And we particularly chose that area because there was a business that was trying to grow its employee base, and there were not enough rooftops. So I think that we all, and David and Bruce will probably share stories such as this, is making those connections and understanding what the need is in the area and pairing that with what the state's asking for.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. And David, to you, and I guess the COVID question is kind of the question of the day. Spent a lot of time on that. We all kind of know what it is, but from a project perspective and then an operation perspective, we'll get some insight from you.
Sure. Of course, the way that our properties are financed, all of our properties are subject to the various eviction moratorium that have come, whether it's through the CARES Act or the CDC action. So a year, it's hard to believe it's been over a year now, but a year ago, we all wondered what was that going to do to us operationally. And at that time, we very carefully watched rent collections, watched operations. Fortunately, what we found was pretty much all of our tenants continued to pay rent. We're a little bit different than Wallach in the sense we weren't really around in the days of the Section 8 program, so we really don't have Section 8 properties. So we rely on our tenants to pay, and we've collected rents at about 97.5% of billings since the eviction moratorium began, which is, not exactly where we'd like to be, but certainly is allowing us to pay our bills and get along. And probably like everyone else, we adopted very strict operating procedures and policies. We closed our common areas, closed our playgrounds, went to very strict cleaning protocols. We actually restricted access to our managers to appointment only. Just in an effort to try to slow the spread and keep everybody safe. And I'm happy to say that really for the most part, those measures have been very effective. We've had very few cases among our 740 employees. I think we've got about 35 cases, none of which, well, I guess 2 were contracted at one of our work sites, but that was on the construction side, but none that we know of on the management side. So from our perspective, the procedures have been pretty effective. We're very anxious to get back to normal operating procedures and looking to see when that can happen. But we feel like what we've done so far has been effective. Good,
absolutely. And Bruce, again, unfortunately, you're the third person to ask. I'll ask the same question, answer as you will.
Well, very similar. Starting back in April, we made changes to how rent collection occurred, provided more flexibility. So, similar to David's statistics, even though on a, month-end basis, our receivables are, up, almost to like 15% religiously, month after month after month. If you stretch that out over the year, it's near 2 to 3% collections, either because of that payment flexibility, or we've worked very closely to connect our residents with rental assistance. So last year, we paid out $475,000 worth of rental assistance. About half of that came through CARES Act money with impact, but we started a fund immediately last year and had it leveraged through other funders, and so some of that came out of that fund, and we probably still have a run rate of about 20,000 a week or so in rental assistance. So, but nobody's moving, so costs are actually down. So that's that's a positive. And the only other thing I would add, similar to what David and Amy talked about, was we have 5 or 6 senior independent living sites, and And, you know, community is such a big deal for our seniors. Unfortunately, we've had to close the community room and take the furniture out of the common areas, and it's been difficult, you know, for those residents. But yeah, so we can't wait to get through this.
Absolutely. It's funny from the affordable side and just the market rate side, we're seeing the same kind of collections as well. It just hasn't been as impactful as we all anticipated in, you know, March, April, May of 2020. So it's good to hear that from a consistency across the multifamily platform. It's consistent on rent payment. Okay, wanted to dive into something that, you know, from an affordability perspective and that's always tossed out in the marketplace. And David, I'm going to point this to you, is really just kind of a brief understanding of the difference between a 9% and a 4% competitive, you know, credit. I know that's something as developers from the multifamily side or non-multifamily, you hear in the marketplace. And I think just a quick outline of what that is, I think would be helpful for the group.
Sure. And, you know, as we talked previously, Trey, we could talk about this all day, but basically the tax credit came into existence in 1986 with the new tax code. A lot of people have tried to take credit for it, but I guess ultimately most people give credit to Ronald Reagan and Jack Kemp for coming up with the idea to privatize the housing program through the tax code. The code provides for two levels of credit, what they called a 70% present value credit, which is basically the 9% credit, and a 30% present value credit, which is the 4% credit. And the theory was whoever built the housing would be able to recover 70% or 30% of the depreciable basis of the property over a 10-year period through a credit. And that's how it came into being. The states are responsible for allocating these credits. And the 9% credit is allocated through a competitive process, which is based on a point system, very competitive, usually 3 or 4 to 1 demand for the amount of credits available. The 4% credit comes along with volume cap with tax exempt bonds. So if you get an allocation of volume cap from a state, you automatically qualify if you meet certain threshold requirements for the 4% credit. So much easier to get the 4% credit. Just as the terms would denote, the 4% credit is less than half as valuable as the 9% credit. So the 9% credit, you know, typically we're looking at a deal that's funded maybe 70, 75% with equity. A 4% deal is funded majority with debt. And so you can imagine that with restricted rents, those 4% deals can be, you know, or just take on a different model. The 9% deals tend to be a little bit smaller because the states are a little stingy in how they give out that 9% credit, try to spread it around. The 4% deals tend to be a little bit bigger because you have to cover the costs of bond issuance. You've got probably an FHA loan or something, and you need some scale there to make it work. You know, a lot of other reasons. The 4% deals generally are a little bit bigger. The 9% deals are going to serve usually a little bit lower income group because the state's going to kind of demand that. And all the studies show that, you know, the very low income people are probably those most in need of units, and that's 30% of median income and below. The 4% deals, because they've got to take on a lot of debt, have to charge higher rents to cover that debt service. And, you know, basically those are the primary differences between the 9 and the 4.
Good. Okay, thanks. And with that, I'm gonna go to Amy and kind of dovetail on that conversation. You know, again, with the tax credits that are available, there's an allocation in the state, and there's a competitive process that you three have to go through in order to receive those credits. And maybe you could just add a little color and background into, you know, how that process goes in order to then be awarded what David just explained, a 9 or 4% credit, and the competitive environment that you guys have to live through in order to get those credits.
Sure. So I'll use Ohio as our example, since that's where we are in a place we understand. I mentioned earlier when we opened the state, each state issues what's called a qualified allocation plan. And within that plan, it talks about priorities and points that you can achieve in order to win the 9% tax credits that David just spoke to. So for Ohio, that qualified allocation plan is generally finalized about 4 plus or minus months prior to when applications are due. So applications are due this year. Applications were due in the state of Ohio in the month of February. So if you're imagining the QAP is finalized and ready for all developers to take action around maybe October or November. So for those that have gone through a zoning process, you may have a loose idea of sites that you're interested in submitting for your 2022 2021 development deal. Until that QAP is finalized, you're likely not moving forward and getting zoning completed. So and zoning has to be in place prior to submission of that application in February. So Trey, as you're thinking about a deal that you've zoned and getting it done over a holiday, Thanksgiving through December as well, just thinking about what a fun process that is and getting that in place by February. Other things to think about that have to be in place for this application is rents. So we're submitting an application in February of 2021 in this case. The awards are announced in May of 2021. And then you're probably closing that transaction in, at best case scenario, maybe between March and June of 2022. If it's a new construction, you're building it for 12 months, which takes you to 2023. Okay, but in February of 2021, you have to submit an application that has the revenue in place and the expense structure in place, and commit to that. Commit to what that looks like in 2023 in this example. Same with construction costs and really, so zoning, rents and expenses, construction costs, I think are the three big things that we're all collaborating and we all do it. You know, if it wasn't hard, it wouldn't be as fun, I guess. But we're all doing this and making these decisions collaboratively with our larger teams, so we know we can execute upon those projects when we learn that we've won an award. In this case, in May, for something that we submitted in February. Trey, is there anything else you're thinking of that would be helpful to add color to from an application and timeline perspective?
Yeah, I think it's just a follow-up to you would be, so in the competitive world, to go for the credits, you're really your development horizon is 12 to 24 months after awarded, but really you have to consider when you're going through the entitlement process, as we currently sit with the entitlement process in Central Ohio, that's a 12 to 18 month process any longer. So really for you to secure and win a bid and bring something to actual market to try to, you know, help with the affordability crisis that we have today and just the volume of units, is it fair to say you're a 24, 36 month from start to finish process?
It is, and if you're taking a chance in getting something zoned prior to the QAP being released for that particular round, you're betting on the fact that, or crossing your fingers that your project will still score within the QAP and meet all of the. So you may get something zoned prior to the QAP release. I was talking about that 4 to 6 month period prior to submission, and then it's possible that those priorities change and you have something zoned that now no longer scores. Is that, so yes is the answer to your question. However, because of those timelines, you are having to take a chance that you're going through that entitlement process for a project that may score in the QAP in 2020, but maybe not score for the 2021 QAP. Does that make sense?
Right, sure. So really from the developer perspective, as we put our developer hats on, really when you're going to the city and the municipality to try to entitle a project, you know, you're asking them to be as efficient as quick as they can because you have certain deadlines. that a project may or may not score for the next year. So if your zoning pushes 6 months, it may not qualify any longer. Therefore, that project that you zoned wouldn't even qualify for your particular use. Is that accurate?
Right. I mean, that's correct. Or you may not maximize the points within the QAP, and therefore it's likely not the best place to put resources on your development team toward. You could still submit the project, but if you're not maximizing the points, you're potentially wasting human resources and financial resources on working on a project that wouldn't then win an award.
Okay. And then Bruce, for you, maybe just a little bit more on that. So as a market rate developer, obviously, I don't look at a maximum number of dollars that the state has allocated for a QA pre. So I could do a 250 unit development in Central Ohio and move forward from an affordable perspective. Just can you talk a little bit about the maximum amount of dollars that are available and the likelihood that large scale projects get awarded in any one MSA or one area just simply because of the availability in the entire state?
Yeah, so there's the availability is truly an issue. There's a scarcity of credits. So I'm not sure the exact number, but it was probably around 90 applications that were submitted from this year's round for 9% credits. Probably 35 will be selected or so. So just adding to what Amy just said, we have to be very vigilant about what we're working on and understand it's not like real development. It's, they have to score, and so much of the scoring system, it balances housing, but it also balances policy related issues. So, they're trying to get housing in certain areas. And so, it could be an area that makes so much sense for a market rate developer to build in, but it just doesn't score well. And in fact, Central Ohio is at a slight disadvantage because it's a growing city. So when you look at things like transportation and a few other things, it doesn't score as well as the Clevelands or the Cincinnatis do. So right off the bat, we're at a little bit of a disadvantage. So there's, number one, a shortage. The other thing I would add, to what David and Amy said, it makes land control really interesting because if you think about that timeline you just talked about, when we submit an application, we have to show control, which is generally an option to purchase, which means we have to have a very patient seller who might not be able to sell their deal if we don't get a credit. So it requires, just a lot of management on the front end and really understanding the QAP process, et cetera. The last thing I would add is that, in a tax credit deal, rents are restricted. So, and it's all based upon area median income. And so, the Columbus market area, for example, has an area median income of roughly about 84,000. Actually, in 21, it went down. So makes it even more complicated. Typically for a tax credit deal, you won't have units unless you income average, which we could spend a ton of time on, but you can't have units that are suited for or qualify for anyone who makes more than 60% of the area median income. So, in the case of affordable housing, you not only have to qualify an individual, but then rents are based upon that too. So our rents are restricted. Costs are never restricted, but rents are restricted. While over a period of time that may, those, rents may be allowed to increase a little bit based upon HUD calculations, we're still restricted. And so it makes what we do in the management of it as tight as as tight as it can be, which is why, Amy and David and their companies have done such a nice job from a vertical integration point of view, because they need the other sources of income that, otherwise you depend upon development fee. And if you're taking that much risk going out, for 2 years, everybody knows what's gone on with lumber costs and things like that and how you've been impacted. So the risk starts to get pretty high.
Sure. And I think maybe, and I'll go back to kind of Amy, maybe get a little bit of color from each of you on this. There's kind of a misperception in the marketplace that, we just need to do more truly affordable housing in order to satisfy the need in the marketplace for volume of housing. All right. And I think it's, and Amy had asked you and then go around to each of you. I think there's a kind of a misnomer, a misunderstanding that there is only so much affordable, truly 9% affordable out there in the marketplace that you guys can competitively succeed on. And again, just from a project size, I mean, what's, from a little color on that, and then also from a project size, where is the kind of the sweet spot for a project that you're able to do in Central Ohio from a number of units perspective? Because I think if we're 40,000, 50,000 short now, we need 500,000-600,000 in the next 10, 15 years. How do we get there? And is affordability truly the way to get there? Or is it a blended approach that the municipalities have to look at?
Yeah, so at Wallach, we manage about 180 communities. And if we just as you do in a statistics class, throw out the high and throw out some of the lows, and then we have some really big projects and a few really small projects, but then in the middle, everything's about 60 units, 40 to 60 units. And that is, as David alluded to, that are, and I'm going to differentiate, if folks know, we do have a large portfolio of Section 8 communities. So Section 8 subsidy comes from the federal government, comes from HUD. And that's kind of that 30% area median income-ish level is what that looks like. But the resident pays just a portion, and then the federal government pays a portion of the rent, and that's adjusted based upon the person. So that's Section 8. Tax credit, Bruce was just talking about that, 60% of AMI. Anyway, I think it's helpful to differentiate there. And then Trey, I think where you're going is there is a whole, I mean, we talk about affordable housing, and there's articles for several years around the fact that this program, the tax credit program, is certainly meeting the need for affordable housing for millions of people across the United States. And I naively thought for a long time that we were just, doing a great job and we were helping to house everyone that needed it, that from an affordability perspective. But cutting it off at 60%, you have people that might be making 62% of AMI up to maybe 120% of AMI. And depending on what parts of the country you're in, they don't have a place to live because they can't qualify for the housing we have, yet market rate housing is too expensive for them. So I think those are the different buckets. And I think you talk about workforce housing, kind of a different market rate housing and rent composition. But just really interesting when you start getting into the details of what Section 8 tax credit, and then I think general definition of workforce housing is.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. And David, maybe kind of walk you down a little, same kind of question, but walk you down some numbers. So if I'm accurate, just quickly, if there's about 39 projects awarded in 2020, and we use the 60 average that Amy kind of discussed and weigh in on that average too of size. So for a state to get for the state to provide 9% tax credits, it's a total of 2,300 units for the entire state, basically, not Central Ohio, just the state. So do you see the numbers working out kind of similar to that?
Yep, absolutely, Trey. I mean, we can never catch up in our world. Really, the gap grows, and I would say with rising construction costs, operating costs, land costs, the gap is going to grow wider. I'll give an example. It's not Central Ohio, but it's our most recent example. We opened a property in New Bern, North Carolina. If you've never heard of New Bern, I'm not surprised. It's 30,000 people. With that, just as Amy said, it's kind of our typical size, 65 units. We had 3,000 applicants before we ever got a certificate of occupancy for those units. That is, we rarely have a property that takes more than about 2 weeks to lease up. So it's the demand is sky high. The resources are very finite. So, I mean, it's kind of a plus and a minus when you know, we cannot overbuild in our business. We can't, you know, kind of have boom and bust because the tax credit is, you know, allocated to states on a per capita basis. So there is no great rush of new developments. We have to compete. Once you win, you've got a long process to build. It's just such a finite resource that will never meet the demand at the current pace.
Oh, good. And then Bruce, focusing really on Central Ohio, when we've talked in different forums before, and we look at what, you know, some of the policies and some of the things that the Central Ohio is trying to push through, and to look at the total state allocation, and then to say the answer is, you know, tax credits or some kind of assistance that direction, we're just not going to get to those numbers. Is that accurate from your perspective?
No, that's probably right. I mean, you just can't make the numbers work to to build something. So let's take a, you know, let's take a 9% tax credit deal. You know, even though there might be 70 or 75% of the capital as equity, you know, represented by those credits after we sell them, still have to fill the gap. You know, even the equity investors, you know, we're probably making 5% on, you know, on those credits, probably a little bit more because they can take the losses over a period of time. But it's so different than market rate investment where, you know, you develop something, 3 years later, you recapitalize it. You can maybe take the equity investors out at that point in time. With affordable, it's a generally a 15-year period. It could be down to 10, as few as 10, but it's a 15-year period. And so in many cases, that building is never worth more than the day it is put in service because rents are restricted, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, yeah, if you manage them carefully, you can get some cash flow, but you have to manage them carefully. So it's such a different equation, which is why we make our money on the front end as opposed to you know, any kind of recapitalization, generally speaking, in the first few years. So, you know, just trying to build more requires capital at a cost that would allow us to build for those rents. And that's, you know, that's one of the tougher issues we have here. It's easy to say we need to build more 30% or 40% AMI units, but you can't make the numbers work in a financial deal.
So I'll mention quickly, Trey, you know, a couple things that are going on that might help the problem a little bit. There's a movement across the country for states to adopt their own state credit. They've been recently adopted in Virginia and South Carolina. Georgia's had one for a long time. California, Massachusetts, a lot of states have them. Our analysis, and we work in a number of those states, our analysis is that increases production in the state by a little bit over 40%. So that state credit alone would, you know, bump up the number of units. Secondly, there are a number of cities where we work, two that are notable. One is Atlanta. They've got a group called Invest Atlanta. They make very low cost funds available to us, which again allows us to spread that credit further. Charlotte has a similar program. They've got a trust fund where they make some loans that, you know, help get more units built and more deals done. So there are some things that can happen at the state and local level to help build more affordable units if there's truly a desire to do it. There is a group now, we're studying a state credit for Ohio. You know, I doubt it's going to happen in the, you know, very near future, but hopefully at some point in time that happens.
Yeah, I mean, again, if the answer is build more, we're going to have to figure out as a city, a state, a region, however you want to look at it, how to get to those opportunities. And if there's a finite amount of credits now, as we've talked about, we're not going to get there with those. So we're going to have to come up with other ways to do it. You know, now, Amy, I'm going to go back to you and just let's talk a little bit about. I mean, one thing you mentioned earlier, which I thought was interesting, is you've got to lock your construction cost and your pricing in, you know, 24 months before you actually develop a project or, you know, finish construction on a project, if you will. How do you deal with, you know, the, you know, fluctuation and material cost? You know, from what we see in the industry today, lumber prices are up, anyone could say 60 to 110%, depending on, where you look and what you're indexing. How do you deal with those in your analysis when you're trying to project out 24 months in order to do a project and bring it to the market?
Well, I wish John Leonard, who leads our construction team, was on this call, because he would say sometimes he probably feels like it's luck, but it's also, he's been in affordable housing for his career, and you don't know what the market's going to do. I mean, none of us have a crystal ball. You figure out what levers you can pull and how you can value engineer things that are available to value engineer. Something I didn't mention is that also what this particular fact makes it more difficult to value engineer, because the states are asking us to commit to certain construction requirements in our application as well, such as energy, star, green, etc. Also, if we have particular amenities that we've promised with the project, we're building those. They're likely not, we can't take them out because we've been awarded points for those items. So it limits, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. It limits the number of things that we can value engineer in particular projects. But it's, I don't know what there's not a secret sauce, so to speak, Trey. It's just figuring out, and sometimes we do have partners, and if we have an opportunity to share particular project successes, that step up to the plate to say, hey, we've got some extra resources for you, because it may be a city, as David was alluding to. We want this to happen. This is important for our city. And so we're going to try to work together with you to find those resources, whether it's real estate tax abatements or things of that nature, which can help us then get projects up and running in rising construction cost environments.
Okay, thanks. That's good background on that. And David, a question for you maybe, and you do and work in, and Amy works in different states, and you work in Central Ohio, where obviously as an organization we're based, and that's what we're talking to our membership about, Central Ohio more specifically. How do you see the differences between, from an entitlement perspective, from a density perspective, for some of those hot button items when you're going through a zoning, either here in Central Ohio, or what's some of the experiences either you or Amy are seeing in some of those different markets that are allowing you to bring projects, whether they're totally affordable at the 9%, at the 4%, or any other project that you're trying to bring through from a zoning perspective?
Yeah, I guess our experience is very positive in the city of Columbus. I think the city's become very supportive of affordable housing. They've, been quick to zone things. They've been supportive in terms of maybe, some density requirements that we need waived or whatever. I would say suburban Central Ohio is not very amenable to affordable housing. Most suburbs have somewhat exclusionary zoning where there is no by right multifamily housing. You probably deal with that in your world. It's worse in our world. There are certain communities around Central Ohio we know will never build within those municipalities. You've probably heard some of the reasons, but we probably hear them, even more. We've had people just come straight out and say, we're never going to allow those people to live in our community, that, put them over there, put them over here. Again, I would suggest that, the city of Columbus, very helpful, very supportive, really working hard to make things happen. But outside of Columbus, there are a couple of communities that, will allow a little bit of affordable housing here and there, but there are a good number that really fight us every step of the way. And those, not having any by right multifamily zoning in so many communities is really an impediment to what we do.
Sure. Bruce, and again, you and I probably develop more specifically in Central Ohio. So give me some background on what you're seeing as far as getting through the entitlement process, the hurdles that we're going with the some of the neighborhood groups and some of the, the development commission and some of those things that we're seeing now, maybe a little different than we did 3-4 years ago.
We spend, particularly in the city, and I would agree with David. I mean, we have good relationships there. Doesn't mean we always get what we want, but we have good relationships there. But we do spend an awful lot of time with the area commissions and the neighbors, and at the end of the day, what we're working to convince them is that this will add to their community and that we're good neighbors. We're long-term players, just like, Woda and Wallach are, right? We're going to be there in that neighborhood. And so we're long-term players and we want to be a part of that. And so, we have to earn their trust to be able to do that. We've made some headway in the suburbs. There's not many, but there's a small number of suburbs. Whitehall being one, I think, has been very open, and we've been wonderful partners together with Whitehall. Grove City and Reynoldsburg more recently, we've done some things. And one of the byproducts of the regional housing study that was just done, or done about a year ago now, I guess, actually one of the better byproducts has been the relationships that we've built with communities. For example, Union County really would like to do some things and to do more. The problem is, according to the the QAP that's currently in place, the projects don't score well. And so it's tough to get a 9% at least done in a Union County, even though they're open to doing that. So you kind of have both sides you have to play. Even though you might have an open community, you might not be able to, get credits if that's what it takes to, to get a project done in any one community.
Sure.
Trey, I don't know if I
Amy.
can tag on to that really quickly. I think it's interesting. The states that do a great job at communicating out their priorities to the municipalities or to the cities within their state that they may be a priority. That helps from a zoning perspective. There are also states that the QAP is written, and all of a sudden this tiny little town, maybe David, your little town you mentioned in North Carolina, is like, why do I have 10 developers coming to ask me to zone 10 different pieces of property, and they can't keep up? So just point of reference, Ohio does a great job at that communication. Other states, when they're not looking for it, it increases that zoning timeline because the towns are overwhelmed.
Right. We've got about 10 more minutes, so I thought I would just go around to each of you, talk about a couple of your success stories that you've had here in Central Ohio in the last 12 to 18 months, whatever that might be. And then we'll end up with, we'll take some questions if once Debbie Lee comes back on, we'll take some questions. So Amy, I'll start with you. Let's talk about the negatives in development. Let's talk about some of the success stories here in the region.
Sure, and Trey, I hope it's okay. I'm choosing a project that's in Peoria, Illinois. So we'll just envision these same fact patterns and stories are happening across the country. So sure, there's a story that anyone could tell that's in the Central Ohio area as well. So this project I chose, it's Parkwood Commons in Peoria, Illinois, and great success story. It plugs into some of the things that we've talked about today. So an owner that wasn't paying attention to a community, 100 units, Section 8. We started working on trying to help this project in 2016, and we just closed on it. We're just leasing it up now, releasing it up after renovation. And it was 40% occupied when we took ownership. So just in a really sad shape for the residents. They were living in deplorable conditions. How we got the project funded was through the 4% tax credit. So we've talked a lot about the 4% credit, and David talked about the debt versus equity. So this particular project, we have all of our funding. So we have the City of Peoria, HUD, the Housing Authority in Illinois, Redstone and NEF, and other local sources. So the capital stack is huge. And talking about timelines and hurdles and setting things from 2016 to 2021 has, as we talk about construction costs and other things, it's one of those projects that you feel like you're on a good trajectory and then you turn in one direction and something happens. And I think for affordable housing, maybe different than market rate or other real estate projects, each one of these of our funders were willing to step up to solve whatever problem we had through innovation and working group situations. So it wasn't ever a situation where it's like, well, owner, developer, that's your issue. The city came up with more resources for us because of it was such a need in the community. And what a great story to see that first resident come back that lived in these conditions. Sue with two young little boys to a brand, we took it down to the studs. It's how bad the buildings were. And the excitement on their faces. So I think those stories are why we do what we do and why all of the challenges that we talked about earlier, certainly what brings me back every day, make that difference.
Good. Yeah. Thanks. That's a great story. David, one that you'd want to share?
Sure. I'll talk about one we're just getting ready to break ground on here in Central Ohio. And this one, again, kind of shows, I guess, the creativity of what it took to get a 4% deal that can serve lower income residents. So we have a 4% deal, and to make that work, we need all kinds of layers of additional capital into the deal. And so we have a partner on the deal, Community Development for All People, and if you know Reverend Edgar and some of his relationships, he brought some resources, and we got some city money from Columbus. We got the 4% credits. We got some assistance from Nationwide Children's Hospital. It's in their service area. We have an investor, Bank of America, who's starting to open some branches in Central Ohio. Kind of wanted to make a splash. They paid over $1 for $1 of credits to make the deal work, but we still had a little bit of a gap in the deal, and we're able to work with the Franklin County Treasurer, who stepped up and agreed to put some low-cost deposits into some banks who are going to finance the project, which essentially bought down our interest rate, which was kind of the last piece of the puzzle that made it all work. So there's a success story where we took the 4% credit, easier to access, and are going to be able to build a property that'll serve lower income residents.
Great. Bruce, last but not least.
Yeah, no, well, first of all, I was a banker for most of my career. I've never seen more complicated structuring in my entire life than an affordable deal. So you just keep hearing about the layering. But actually, my example is really around entitlements in kind of different forms. I'm going to give you three really quick examples, but they're different aspects of it. So we're about to build in downtown Linden 100 senior units. And again, just as David said, the piecing together of that structuring, it's a 4% deal that we needed to really close the gap on. And so the contribution, the county created a capital magnet fund last year with the increase in conveyance fee dollars that they used. I know, David, you guys got an award from that too. The city came in on it. Down in Franklinton, we're going to build right across from Gravity 2 in a very tight lot, and we were able to work with with a developer and with Kaufman and the city to do an economic development deal to share amenities in Gravity 2, right? So parking, et cetera. So that allowed us to do those things. And the third one just kind of fell in our lap, and I hope I'm not jinxing myself because it's in for a tax credit, and I hope we get it. But when some of the metropolitan areas, in this case Easton, Georgetown Company was looking to extend their TIF in Easton, one of the requirements from the city was they had to put affordable housing there. And so they agreed to put 200 units of affordable housing there. And so we're working with, with Georgetown to develop 200 units in the first 50 unit stage going into there. I mean, we would have never been able to build at East. I mean, just land is $500,000 to $1 million an acre, right? So we wouldn't have been able to do it. And so unless the city would have come out and made that requirement, that wouldn't have happened. So there's entitlements in different forms, and I really see some things, happening in a commitment, particularly from the city and the county. I think too has really been stepping up.
Good. And I'm going to Debbie Lee. If we've got about 5 minutes left, questions that have come through.
I do not see any questions. I think because you were also thorough in all of your information. That's what I think happened. If anyone has questions, you can put them in the Q&A. We just really filled the time. That was amazing and interesting and overwhelming too. Wow. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and bring up a slide, but if you have Q&A question, put them in the Q&A and I'll address those. Really appreciate. Sorry.
Yeah, before you do that, I'll just personally thank from an organization perspective of NAIOP and personally from a perspective of shedding some light on the true affordability side of the marketplace. I think that's it's very important as we as developers and NAIOP are being asked to do mixed use developments as part of zoning that may come through. I think the affordability component is, well, I know it is a big hot button for the city, will continue to be, and obviously the shortage of housing has been a big hot button, will continue to be. And I personally appreciate the three of you for spending the time. I thought it was a lot of good information. And if anybody has any questions, they can feel free to send them to Debbie Lee. I'll send them out to the panelists and we can answer those questions. But I did want to thank each of you for your time.
We did get a question, so I'll read it real quick. Is that all right?
Sure.
All right. What policy or policies would you suggest cities, states, municipalities implement to help make housing more affordable, perhaps outside of just adding additional credits?
Okay, we have 2 minutes. Which one of you would like to adequately fix all the housing problems in 2 minutes? David, I'll let him take this one.
Well, I'll throw two things out. Be willing to grant tax abatements because that goes a long way to helping finance affordable housing, and be very flexible with impact and tap fees and the like, because sometimes with some of the communities we work in, those fees are so high that in essence they make multifamily development impossible.
Yeah, those are the top two, and I think adding on is even permit fees, other types of fees. I mean, David, you had two specific ones, but any construction fees at all, would waiving of those. We always ask. It's not always granted, but we always ask.
Yeah, I would I agree with all of those, and the last thing I would say is just a bit more flexibility in zoning and regulatory environment. So I think not just the affordable side, probably all of us literally have to go get either variances first and then go get, rezonings. And it just takes a lot of time and a lot of money on some things that, we could probably modernize a little bit more. So that would help a lot.
And I'll add my 2 cents worth if I think that some of the tap fees across the city and the region are, definitely make it difficult to bring an affordable project to the marketplace, whether it's truly affordable, with tax credits or an AMI threshold that we're trying to get to, or a market rate development as well. Debbie Lee, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you, Trey. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, David. Thank you, Bruce. Really appreciate it. We don't have any other questions. We met our time. I asked that everyone save the dates. We do have an interesting presentation coming up in May on the brand new Columbus wage theft ordinance a panel discussing that, which was just implemented January 1st. So it's new and there are changes. And then our golf outing, we're going to get together in person for that and be outside and safe, June 10th. And then July 14th, a cruise stadium tour. So again, another safe thing outside that we can do. We're hopefully back to in person after that. And we'll see you all then. I really miss everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All
Thanks.
right.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.